Give them a shot to do what?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Protect Our Queens podcast presented by the Give Us a Shot Network. With me, as always, my brother in Christ, my partner in women's basketball crime, Martin Soares. How we feeling on this good Tuesday night, brother?
Another Tuesday back on our regular night. Talk some women's basketball, some WNBA Finals. Had some crazy intense first couple of games. So last time we were here last week, we had a chance to give our preview a little bit. That was last Wednesday. We're back on our regular Tuesday night. Good to be here. Anyone who's tapped in, who's watching with us live, good to have you here. Make sure you leave comments as we go through the conversation talking about the finals. And if you're watching on the playback, good to have you here as well. And stay tuned with us, especially if you love your women's basketball. This is definitely the place for you.
This is absolutely the place for you. In non-WNBA news, Martin Soares, the college women's basketball preseason. We're here, man. We're here. We're like, I think weeks away, I think, from the beginning of the college women's basketball season. And of course, as expected, my Gamecocks open up the preseason AP poll #1 at the top where we belong, right? Rightfully so. Pumped, bro. How excited are we for women's college hoops to come back, bro?
Bro, it's going to be a big, fun season. Yeah. I'm very much looking forward to seeing some of the top freshmen that are coming in, players like Sarah Strong at UConn. We had some big transfers, of course. I saw Dawn Staley saying she thinks that South Carolina is better now than they were a year ago this time. It's going to be a really fun season. Texas is reloaded. UCLA is reloaded. USC, again, big transfers, big time freshmen coming in. It's going to be another big, exciting season, and a lot more stars out of the college game are going to continue to rise up and get ready to make their way to the W. So
absolutely,
it's gonna be another big season, man.
And speaking of making their way to the WNBA draft lottery, November 17th. That's going to be exciting. Going to get to see who essentially will be where Paige Beckers will be going when she comes out this year. So that's another exciting thing to look out for, bro. There's a lot to talk about, but that's all in the future. I want to talk about the here and now. The WNBA Finals tied at 1-1, bro. We go to Minnesota tomorrow and Wednesday for games 3 and 4. And like you said, instant classics in games 1 and 2. We're going to talk about Stewie and Fee and their defense. We're going to talk John Cole Jones. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Lynx and what they need to do to get back on the right page. Martin has some concerns that he's going to share with us tonight about the Lynx. And I am going to give my keys to victory for the Liberty and the Lynx to win game 3. So stay tuned for all that. And don't forget, please, at any point of the course of the night, join the conversation. We want to talk to you. We want to hear from you. But for now, let's hit this intro and let's get this show on the road.
Protect our queens.
No matter what it takes, we must protect our queen.
I just love playing the game. It's fun.
I'm reacting on what the defender does.
I hit them with a hezzy. After that, they quit.
Yeah, I think I've always just been able to get downhill, so I've sort of prided myself on that.
I know what I'm doing. Like, people can't tell me I'm not doing the right, I've been taught the right way.
That intro gets me every time, man. All right, so let's start off with Breanna Stewart and Napheesa Collier. Each had set their own little bit of history on the defensive side of the ball in the finals. In game 1, Napheesa Collier had 6 steals, and in game 2, Breanna Stewart had 7 blocks. When we previewed this series, we talked about how important this matchup was on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. But sticking with the defense, how impressed have you been with Stewie and Fee and their just defensive versatility and their dominance on defense so far through 2 games?
I mean, it's been really, really impressive to see how each of them have dominated on defense at moments in this series, even in the last game. Like, I think one of the more interesting things I've been looking at is what you pointed out, which is the matchup when they're actually guarding each other. Yeah. And I actually think that, I mean, they're both figuring each other out. They're both really hard to score on. And they each, I feel like, just get better at guarding the other. Like Stewie after the last game is putting quotes out there talking about how I know she likes to go left. So like there are tells that they're starting to pick up on and even make known publicly that it's like, hey, I'm trying to take this away from her. But I feel like I've seen Stewie struggling with Fee more than the other way around. I get the sense that, like, you see those times when Fee will just press up on it. Like that one time, I think it was in game 2, she just met her at half court and just tied her up. Rebecca Lobo keeps talking on the broadcast about how Nafisa has this knack for causing jump balls. She'll just tie you up. Like, and I said to her, I've been watching the games with my brother, and right before Brianna started to get loose a little bit, she hit a couple threes in transition. I was like, yo, Stewie's having a hard time scoring on her, like straight up, like off the bounce. And that's when, like I said, Stewie loosened up. She got a couple threes in transition, just straight catch and shoot. I was like, look, I think she's going to keep it a little more simple from here on out. Like if she's taking over 3 dribbles against Nafisa, I mean, that goes for anybody, but that much activity against a great defender like that, Nafisa kind of feeds on that. Like you've seen her guard different people well. You know, she got a good stop on John Quell in that game one time on a seal. Stewie's been doing the same, getting blocks and stops and deflections on different people. So I think in the matchup between them, I think I've seen and noticed, and we'll see if this really has more of an impact on like how games are won, because I don't think either of these games have come down to their individual matchups specifically. It's really, you know, it's how each of them have played. But that is something to watch for, because I feel like I've seen Stewie really struggling more, like straight up, with having to take Nafisa off the bounce and get a bucket, as opposed to vice versa. But I'll say though, overall, I think we're seeing, I think in the last game, particularly, Stewie is, I think she's showing a little more range. Like she's longer. Like she's got the 7'1" wingspan. Nafisa's wingspan is probably around like 6'4" or 6'5". Yeah, it's still very effective and very versatile as a defender. But with Stewie's length, with that 7'1" wingspan, one thing that I noticed that Stewie was doing, and that I think was even a point of emphasis for the Liberty, which is how they turned the Lynx over even more in game 2, and how they were able to limit Nafisa's touches even more. You saw way more deflections and way more of an emphasis on taking away entry passes to Collier. There was a possession when Stewie was on Alana Smith. This was in the 3rd quarter of game 2. She's on the perimeter, and she's obviously looking to lob it in. They had a switch. Nafisa had Febich on her, and Alana Smith's about literally, you know, basically telegraphing, but looking like she's going to lob it in. Stewie's right in front of her. She just jumps up and steals the ball. She just literally takes away the entry pass. And that happened 4 or 5 times throughout that game, whether it was a deflection or just the Liberty mindfully. Like the story was the Liberty's defense as a whole, led by Stewie in game 2. Yeah. One of the things I definitely noticed about Stewie and the whole team's defense was their emphasis on deflections, help defense, and specifically taking away those easy entry looks into Nafisa Collier inside.
It's interesting because in that conversation last Wednesday, we were previewing this series. The first thing we talked about was this matchup. And one thing that I noted was it'll be interesting to see, again, defensively how they match up against each other. But what's interesting to me is, while Nafisa has done a better job defending Stewie one-on-one, right? I believe in game 1, Stewie was 1 for 11 or 1 for 10 on something like that when Nafisa Collier was her primary defender. Whereas that's the case from a team aspect, Stewie and the Liberty have done a better job defending and containing the Lynx and their offensive attack as a team, right? And so that's I think probably been the biggest difference, the most obvious difference for me, right? And the impact of Stewie's defense versus the impact of Nafisa's defense is Nafisa individually exceptional. She's been great, rightfully so. She's the defensive player of the year, right? The Stewie has been great individually, but what we haven't seen from the Lynx is what we're seeing from the Liberty. Great sound team defense. We're talking a lot of forced deflections. We're talking a lot of steals, a lot of forced putting the Lynx in scenarios where they're forcing just making bad decisions with the ball, which I'm going to talk about later on with Courtney Williams, because Courtney Williams has made 2 very bad decisions in this series at the end of games. In game 1, they were able to rise above it. In game 2, not so much. But again, going back to the one-on-one component of it, because of how tightly contested these games have been, I think it's been more obvious that that Fee has been winning the one-on-one matchup, because when Fee needs to get a bucket, when the Lynx need a bucket, Fee's able to go get that bucket over top of Stewie. We haven't really seen that yet for Brianna Stewart over Nafisa Collier, and that can be just because in both of these games, the Lynx have been fighting from behind to make it tight and win, right? It could just be a simple thing of because of the offensive options. Sabrina had a much better game in game 2 than she did in game 1, obviously. Jonquil Jones has been great through 2 games as well. Phoebus has hit a couple big shots, especially down the stretch of these games. Not so much in game 1. I think she only hit 1 shot in game 2, but in game 1 she did. Stewie has not had many instances where she's needed to, hit a big shot down the stretch. It's just, unfortunately though, the 2 moments when she has needed to hit a shot, she has failed. So that's been the one thing that's interesting for me, is like on this individual, on the one-on-one dynamic, kind of sticking with what we were talking about in the preview of the series. I think that Stewie has certainly been winning the head-to-head matchup, but Stewie's defense has translated better in the overall team defense and the way that the Liberty have been able to stifle the Lynx as a team and mitigate a lot of the offensive firepower that we expected to see Minnesota exhibit so far through 2 games in the series.
Yeah, just to clarify, because I had to double check from when you said, because I had it down too. Nafisa had 6 blocks in game 1. Stewie
right.
had
I flipped it.
steals in game 2. Yeah, I had them flipped too. That's why I had to write it down so I knew what it was exactly. Because again, for the 2 best players, and correct me if I'm wrong, I remember Stewie set a finals record with 7 steals. Was
she did
6 blocks
yes.
a finals record?
I believe so.
Well?
Yeah. I believe so.
Yeah,
I can fact check it. But
but I mean, I think I remember them saying that was a finals record. But the fact that the 2 of them, the 2 best players, are showing literal greatness on the defensive end, that's just really impressive. I do think, like, even going back to what I said about like feeling like Stewie struggles a little more with scoring on Nafisa. It's what I was saying watching the game. Like, Fee is 4 years younger. And, I tend to forget that they played together on the national championship team at UConn. Like, Nafisa has come up really watching and studying Brianna. And again, she's 4 years younger. She's younger, a little more nimble, a little more mobile. Like, that's to her advantage. And I feel like I can just see that. Stewie is obviously still very effective offensively. Still very versatile. She can still get her shot off, but I just think Nafisa, being just as sharp as her, having great instincts and IQ, having great hands and feet, and then just being familiar with Brianna's game, it makes for it looks like it's a very unique challenge for Brianna offensively. But because of her range and versatility, she's still able to get her 20 points. But to your point, Brianna has not had really like a big scoring game yet in the series.
No, she has not. Now, I will say, and obviously you're not going to ever expect Brianna Stewart to miss 15 shots from the field the way that she did in game 1. But this game certainly, a bounce back game for her and much needed. But what's interesting to me is, and I said this in the preview, I said that there was not going to be a game in this series where either team would finish the game being blown out, right? I think the Liberty won game 2 by 14, but that had a lot more to do with like a couple free throws that they hit down the stretch just because of fouling, not necessarily because they were like owning the Lynx. What has been surprising to me is we saw in the first round matchup how easy it was. And I don't know if it's because a difference, I don't want to say easy. I don't know if it's because it's a different in talent level or a difference in game planning, but the Lynx did a much better job against the Mercury of responding to the different defensive looks that they were getting, right? You and I talked about how when they were getting, when the Mercury were playing zone, the Lynx were having their way. It wasn't until the Mercury started playing a little bit of a little bit man defense where things got a little bit tighter. But even then, after a couple possessions, the Lynx were able to figure it out. It's been interesting because that's been the thing for the Lynx all season. It seems like so far through 2 games, they found themselves twice now trailing by, double digits early on. and they haven't for some reason been able to figure out what the Liberty are doing defensively. And that to me has been shocking because we've been able to see the Lynx see one thing and counteract the other way in their advantage. They haven't quite been able to do that yet so far this series. And that is something that's going to need to change as this series shifts to Minnesota for games 3 and 4 if they want to not only take the 2-1 lead on Wednesday, but, win a championship overall when it's all said and done. And I'm surprised that they haven't been able to do that yet. I didn't think they would struggle this much with the Liberty on defense.
Yeah, well, I think it goes to, and look, we both picked Minnesota. I probably should have stuck to my heart and just gone with the Liberty. I was a year late. I went all in on them last year, and I should have just brought all that energy over to this year. But I had said, and we've got the evidence here somewhere if you're going to play the clips, but I said,
right,
I wouldn't be surprised Liberty win. They're the more talented team. And I'm not surprised because my biggest question mark, even though I picked the Lynx because they've been winning me over with their effort and their edge and their execution, my biggest question about Minnesota has been offensively. Can they be special when it's time to be special? The Liberty defense has shown these are both special defenses and have proven to be special offenses. Both were special all year, the two best teams all year. I am not surprised because this was my question about the Lynx from the beginning was like, can they continue to manufacture consistent, high level, productive, potent offense? And we're going to get into a little bit like where they're obviously not getting it and where they could use some more help. But this is the team of execution, of shot distribution. Even though we know who their best player is, there's no emphasis on one player. And even that one player, who their best player is, Nafisa Collier, I've touched on it. I feel like the last few weeks in different ways in terms of Nafisa and how special she is and just how unique she is in that she's a very simple basketball player. She can take over a basketball game. We've seen her do it. We know that she can do that, but I'm talking about in the way where you literally you start giving her the ball and it doesn't matter who's on her. She takes over in that way. And again, not to say she can't do that. I just think that she takes over more within the structure of their very structured system and offense. And when it's humming, which I think game 3, they're going to look to come out really aggressive. Obviously they're at home. I think some players will shoot better and make more shots. And that's what they need. I think they're going to Kayla McBride early. I think they're going to Bridget Carlton early. I think they're going to look to really hit and get into their offense even earlier. So they're not having to get down to the, late in the shot clock and having to manufacture Courtney Williams has to create a shot, or you have to try and find Fee in the right spot in the right moment, because their scoring comes from their execution. Right. So the Liberty can ad-lib a little bit more in transition. I think they're more dangerous. They've got different shooters. Now, after game 2, we've seen that Leonie Fiebich was your X factor for the Liberty, I believe. Yeah. Between her and Naj Laney, if either one of them are having a double-digit scoring game, you're in trouble because now they're showing that they have a fourth. Their fourth person is ready to step up and hit shots and get double-digit scoring, and that's where they get really dangerous. I think Minnesota still has to kind of show that. So I'm not as surprised that Minnesota, only came up with 66 points in game 2. Credit the Liberty because Sabrina. We've challenged her. Sabrina played the best defense. I mean, like I said last week, she's been getting better. We're not going to think of her as a lockdown defender, but if you watch the Aces series, you saw, I saw a different defensive Sabrina than I saw last year. It's night and day, just keeping her shoulders square in front of guards that she couldn't do before. Yeah. And her help defense, even her on the ball defense on Courtney Williams late in game 2, a totally different Sabrina. So right now, my Lynx pick, I'm concerned about it, and we'll keep talking about it. But right now, it's looking like when the Liberty are dialed in, the best version of themselves. I don't think we've seen the best version against the best version yet, but it looks like when the Liberty are the best version of themselves, they're just the better team. When they're dialed in like that defensively, Minnesota doesn't have too many answers for it.
That's a good point. We're going to put a pin in Minnesota because we do have some things talking about Minnesota coming up in just a second. Please remember, if you are watching live, we appreciate you watching live. We want you guys to join this conversation. Talk to us. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know how you're feeling. We want to talk to you. Let's switch gears very briefly. Let's pivot from Stewie. Let's talk more about Jonquel Jones. We're going to toss it to a clip of you naming Jonquel your X factor in this series.
The Liberty they've only lost since Jonquel Jones has joined the team. When she gets a double-double, the team is 31-3. In the regular season, they're 24-0. In the playoffs, they're 7-3. So total in 34 games, 31-3 when Jonquel gets a double-double. And I think this matchup, I think she could wear out Alana Smith. I think it could go either way. That's a huge matchup on both sides there at the 5. But I think Jonquel is going to be the key to, if she can overpower Alana Smith and be just too much for her, because she can stretch it too and cut and shoot behind the 3-point line. Jonquel can do it all as well. And I think physically she can kind of wear on her. But I think Alana Smith with her mobility could give Jonquel some problems. But I think if we're seeing Jonquel get double-doubles, be physical, be active, be dominant, and be too much for Minnesota inside, where I think she does have a physical advantage, I think that can be the X factor for the Liberty. Almost sounds like someone knows what they're talking about out here.
You wouldn't be surprised to know that. Jonquel Jones, I would say, and maybe this title card might be a little bit exaggerating. You let me know. I would say that so far through 2 games, Jonquel Jones has been dominant. And the reason why I say that is because so far through 2 games, going back to, again, the Lynx's struggles offensively with being able to figure out the Liberty on defense, I don't think the Lynx have figured out an answer to stop Jonquel Jones, right? You look at, what I tweeted from the page on from our Twitter account on Sunday before the game. The first thing I mentioned is the Liberty, the Lynx, whether it's Alana Smith, whether it's Bridget Carlton, whether it's Maisha Hines-Allen, or a combination of the 3, whoever's on Jonquel Jones, they need to figure out a way to limit Jonquel Jones' productivity for the stat that you brought up. The Liberty don't lose when Jonquel Jones get a double-double. And so far, she had a double-double in game 1. She had a near double-double in game 2. They lost. They did lose. But in game 2, they had a near double-double. But you could argue, though, and you even made this point to me in our messages as we were prepping for tonight, that loss had less really to do with maybe the Lynx and their ability to figure it out in the second half, and more to do with the fact that Sabrina Ionescu and Brianna Stewart combined for 33 missed shots in that game in totality. I think you and I both agree, regardless of who we pick to win this series, if they don't miss 33 combined shots, the Liberty are probably up 2-0 in this series coming into Wednesday. Or
if Stewie just makes a free throw, forget all those shots, forget all those missed shots. I mean, game 1 is up in the air. Game 1 could have literally
gone either way.
So many scenarios in that game. You could spend a whole hour just on that.
But talking about Jonquel specifically, because I've gone as far as say I think she's Finals MVP so far through 2 games. What is it about Jonquel that you think has been giving Minnesota so many fits with her offensively down low?
It's literally what I said in that clip, and it's not as much down low for me as the times that the possessions that really stick out for me offensively are when she puts her head down and she takes 2 or 3 dribbles from the 3-point line, and Alana Smith, or you said Bridget, trust and believe me, Bridget Carlton won't be the one to stop to whatever you said, contain her, slow her down, keep her trust me, that she's not one of the options. She will not be. They will not be asking her to try to do that. And if they do, it's going to get even worse. But I think it's like I said in the clip, they don't have a matchup for her physically with her size and her strength. And then, there are times where at her size, you get passes to get a little clunky 1 or 2 times. You might travel sometimes, but for the most part, Jonquel Jones is a coordinated stretch big who can pump fake, make a ball fake, take a couple dribbles, and give you some shoulder bump, and lay you, which she has done multiple times. So, and again, she can shoot the ball from 3. She's not, hitting a bunch of shots out there, but I think it is her ability to stretch the floor where you have to be honest. And then again, I don't want to make it seem like she's Candace Parker out there. It's just that she's had a few dribble drives from the perimeter where Alana Smith, if someone has switched off on her, whoever it is, they can't stop her from doing what she wants to do. They just don't have an individual presence that can match what she does inside.
I'm so far through 2 games, I'm seeing the same Jonquel Jones we saw post All-Star break last year that made the Liberty the best team in the league last year and got them to the finals. It's that ability to put her head down and just do whatever she wants with opposing defenses. That is what got the Liberty to the finals last year post All-Star break. Her being unlocked, as we reference on the show several times down the stretch, but more importantly, that was the piece of the puzzle that was concerning in that series after Kia Stokes and Chelsea Gray was injured. It's, well, if Jonquel Jones has her way down low, the Liberty are going to win the chip. Here we are this year. The exact same thing has been unfolding. If Jonquel Jones continues to have her way with this Minnesota defense, Minnesota's not going to win, and I'm going to look like a fool because I've gone as far as to say that Minnesota's going to win this series 3-1, and at this point, the only way that happens is if they win the next 2 games, and I don't think that's going to happen. Like, what we're seeing from Jonquel Jones and the beauty about her being able to stretch the floor is, unlike in game 1, where I think Jonquel, by circumstance, because of Stewie's struggles and because of Sabrina's struggles, she had to get hers and she had to get hers early. Jonquel's ability to stretch the floor makes it so much easier for Sabrina to get hers and for Stewie to get hers. So much so that I feel like at this point in the series through 2 games, me personally, I feel like the game plan moving forward should just be to play through Jonquel for all the reasons you mentioned. The Lynx don't have an answer for Jonquel Jones. So much so that I feel like their best answer for Jonquel Jones would be to put Nafisa on her, because it feels like Nafisa is the only one in Minnesota that might even be able to hold her own in the moments that we've seen them go one-on-one with each other. The only downside to that is taking Nafisa and putting her on Jonquel means you're taking her off of Stewie. And I don't think there's anybody in Minnesota, no matter who it is, that's not Nafisa Collier who can contain Brown and Stewart offensively, which means that as a team, going back to my initial point from the first segment, as a team, the Lynx have to do better. There's too much offensive firepower in New York to, double one player in favor of the other, because all of these players on this team can hit an open shot, whether it's Sabrina, whether it's Stewie. We saw Betnaj Eleni go off in game 2. She had 20. We know what Febich can do. Like, something has to give. So either they figure out a way to limit Jonquel Jones, whatever that looks like, or they run the risk of having to pull Nafisa off of Stewie and put her on Jonquel. And that is just as much of a death toll for their championship aspirations as it is just letting Jonquel Jones have free range over the court and do whatever she wants to do. It's a very tricky situation right now for Minnesota, and they're going to have to figure it out if they want to win game 3 and or game 4.
Yeah. I mean, maybe trying to send more coordinated doubles. And what I had said about these 2 teams, because they pass so well, I told you the rotations and the passing game were going to be the most important things to watch for. And we would be remiss talking about Jonquel Jones if we didn't mention her passing game out of the post. A lot of a couple, I won't say a lot, I think 1 or 2 of those threes that Naj Laney got out of the corner was Jonquel Jones making an opposite pass on the opposite block, making the diagonal to the opposite corner. And she had a few plays like that out of the post where either she felt the double or she just read the help and she made the right pass. Like her passing and her playmaking also can't get overlooked too, because a lot of times that's what initiates a great shot or the next pass or another good drive in the Liberty offense. But you bring up a good point. There may be more possessions. Maybe they more mindfully get Nafisa on Jonquel for some possessions. I mean, maybe that the biggest risk I saw from that, and you're right, it's running a risk putting someone else on Stewie. It's also running the risk of Nafisa getting in foul trouble, because Jonquel you're going to be wrestling with her down there. That's a big risk just in terms of Nafisa getting into foul trouble. But you make a good point. So I think we should see some kind of adjustment. I think they got to hurry them up. I mean, I think the main thing that I noticed from, game 1, and I mentioned in our preview why, one of the strengths I felt like Minnesota had was their speed and mobility in the front court. The Alana Smith, Jonquel Jones matchup was, and I had said, like I said in the clip, I'm like, if Jonquel is playing physical basketball and she's out there locked in, she's going to win that matchup because she's just the better player. And she has more things to work with. But if Alana Smith messes around and comes out and hits a couple threes and is crashing the boards and is running the floor and like beating Jonquel in like the space and running and speed game, that's where I thought Alana Smith might have the advantage. But the Liberty are dictating tempo for the most part, I think. Jonquel's beating her in the half court. And Alana Smith isn't gaining really any kind of advantage, I would say. I think Jonquel is doing what I said she might do and what would give the Liberty the edge in just overpowering her physically. Like she really can't handle her. So I do think that we might see some kind of change or adjustment or a different look from the Lynx defensively, specifically to address Jonquel, because that kills you. That's rebounding, that's paint points, that's just physically exhausting you, having to again, wrestling with her and rebounding with her. Like she's wearing them out.
To the rebounding point, the Liberty set the WNBA Finals record for most offensive rebounds in a game. In game 1, they had 20. They had nearly as many in game 2. And I texted you and I told you, I don't think I've ever seen the Lynx dominated on the boards the way that the Liberty have been dominating them on the boards so far.
But the Lynx weren't good defentive rebounding all year.
That's a great point.
Defensive rebounding.
That's a great point. But I don't think I've ever seen that. But I don't think I've ever seen it be this bad. Like they were never. We never looked at the Liberty or the Lynx and thought they were like a scary rebounding team. But I don't think they were ever rebounded this badly. And maybe it's exacerbated by the fact that they found themselves now in back-to-back games being down by 15 plus points and having to fight their way back. Maybe that's what it is. But what I will say this, and this is something I noticed in game 2, Jonquel Jones did get into foul trouble early in that game, and that's what kept the game relatively close until she was able to kind of keep that in check, and then the Liberty started to pull away. It's a really odd question to ask, but I want to ask because obviously you've played basketball, you've been around basketball a lot. Is there a way schematically that the Lynx can actually force Jonquel Jones into foul trouble early without, risking, taking Nafisa off of Stewie defensively, without risking anything that they want to do offensively, but still keep Jonquel off the floor? Because it seems like when Jonquel's off the floor, the Lynx do a lot better offensively. That's so far through 2 games, that seems to be what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think, Courtney Williams continuing to be aggressive and getting those paint touches. I mean, out of their perimeter players, she looks to get to the basket, probably the most. And sure. I mean, but we know her bread and butter is the mid-range jump shot. So, Kayla McBride, outside shooter, Bridget Carlton, outside shooter. So you don't have guards that are doing too much playmaking, putting pressure on Jonquel and the Liberty bigs that much. So, again, I think that's something, you don't want to put too much on Alana Smith's plate, and you don't want to target her as going out there and like head hunting Jonquel Jones and being like, you need to go at her. And, but I'm just, those situations where you're below the free throw line, where you're trying to put pressure on her, usually those are guards having to do that. But that's going to be tough. I mean, to notice that, if you notice that they're better when she's off the floor, they should probably look to attack her a little bit more. Getting her off the floor and attacking her on both ends is probably something we're going to see more of in game 3.
Let's transition now from the X factor that is Jonquel Jones to what seems to be a lack of X factors in Minnesota. We're going to play a clip and then come right back. For me, I'm going to say it's Alana Smith. The first time these two teams matched up way back in May, she had 15 points. She was a big reason why they won that game. She hasn't quite played at that level in the other 3 matchups that these two teams had against each other throughout the course of the season, including the Commissioner's Cup. But we know that she can do it. We know that she can hit big shots. She hit countless big shots in the game against the Sun to close out. She hit a couple big shots even against the Mercury as well. We know that's what she's capable of, and she can crash the boards. And to your point earlier about the Jonquel Jones component, she can also force Jonquel Jones to step out and have to guard the perimeter as well, which can leave open space for driving lanes, whether it's for Nafisa, whether it's for McBride, whether it's for Courtney Williams or whoever. So I have my eye on her because I know that she can hit big shots. And similar to Fabich, she might need to hit a couple big shots down the stretch of these games. Alana Smith in game 1 did a little bit of everything for the Lynx. 9 points, 9 boards, 4 assists, 3 blocks. Not that great shooting from the field. In game 2, though, 14 points, much better shooting from the field. Not as many rebounds, not as many assists. But at the end of the day, Courtney Williams and Nafisa Collier are going to need help from the others in Minnesota if they want to win a championship over the New York Liberty. If you had to name one player specifically that you're looking to step up in games 3 and 4, who would you say that one player needs to be?
It's who I said is the X factor, my X factor for them, Bridget Carlton. She hasn't really done anything in this series yet. She's 5 for 13 with 13 total points in 2 games. She had a couple of air balls in game 2. Like, she is not anywhere close to in rhythm shooting the ball, and she led the league in 3-point percentage this year. People still have not even gotten a sense of, if they're watching the finals, they don't even know how much of an X factor Bridget Carlton can be. So she's one player who I absolutely look to see them go to early and look to get going. I think she's going to play better at home. It's her first finals. It might be her first, but I think it's her first playoffs. Definitely her first finals. But I just think she's one who you have to look to have just hit a few more shots. Like, you don't look for her to do anything crazy. I mean, have a breakout game, go crazy if you feel so led, but do what you did this year for us, which is be a consistent high level, catch and shoot 3-point, spot up shooter. And she hasn't found any kind of rhythm shooting the ball, and they need that. And she's the one player who hasn't really shown up at all yet. Kayla McBride, not as good of a game 2, but in game 1, she scored over 20 and she was in a rhythm all game hitting threes. If they can get, I think they're going to look to get Kayla going early, but I think they're also going to look to get Bridget going early, because if the two of them are hitting shots, that's where Minnesota absolutely looks their best.
I 100% agree, and I would say the person I'm looking out for is, to your point, Kayla McBride. Kayla McBride played great in game 1. She had 22 points. I believe she shot 66% from the field or something like that. She looked like Kayla McBride. In game 2, not so much. We know what Nafisa Collier brings to the table. We know what Courtney Williams brings to the table. They cannot function at their best without the assistance of the 3-point shooting ability that is Kayla McBride. She was one of the best 3-point shooters in the league this season. If I'm not mistaken, I heard a stat that Rebecca Lobo dropped either at the beginning of game 2, to your point. Bridget Carlton and Kayla McBride had the best catch and shoot 3-point percentage this season. They were 1 and 2. They were the 2 best in the league. No one was better. So Kayla McBride's ability to knock down shots from the perimeter is what opens up those mid-range shots for Nafisa Collier and Courtney Williams. She can't have any more games where she's not getting at least 15 to 18 points in this series if the Lynx want to win a championship. It just can't happen. Whether it's you're getting those shots early on in a rhythm and then staying consistent throughout the course of the night, or whether you're hitting big shots down the stretch of the game, as we've seen Betnijah Laney and Leonie Fiebich do. Those two together, but especially Kayla McBride. Kayla McBride has to play like she's the 3rd best player on this team. That's what she is. That's what she showed us that she could be. And again, she played great in game 1. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even know she had 22 points in game 1. Just with all the chaos of that game, you forget, because of how great she is at what she does, that she can have a very quiet 22-point game. We need to see more of that in games 3 and 4 if the Lynx want to have a shot to win a championship. So I'm 100% going to be looking for Kayla McBride to leave her mark. I don't think again, she had a great game 1, but we don't look at game 1 and say that was like the Kayla McBride game, for example. That's the Courtney Williams game for what she did in the 4th quarter. But we know that Kayla McBride is capable of leaving her mark on one of these games, like definitively, without a shadow of a doubt. We know that if the Minnesota Lynx win a playoff game, it can be because of Kayla McBride. We have to see that in one of these 2 games in Minnesota, and preferably it's game 3, because you don't want to be behind. You don't want to be down 2-1 to the New York Liberty.
No, I think they're coming out swinging in game 3. I think they're looking to score like 90 points. I think they're looking to really get their offense humming early, which starts with, I think, getting Kayla McBride off of those stagger screens, those pin downs, and looking to, create openings and create offense out of that. Minnesota is 6 for 20 and 9 for 22 from 3 in these 2 games. They're a combined minus 27 from 3. And I mean, that's a huge stat. As much as New York needs Sabrina's threes, which they do, it's like a lifeline for them. It's an energy booster. When Stewie starts hitting like she did in game 2, that's when it really gets problematic. But Sabrina needs Sabrina threes, and the Liberty needs Sabrina threes offensively just as bad as they need them. Minnesota needs Kayla McBride threes. That's a huge part of their offense. She's their best 3-point shooter, even though Bridget Carlton led the league in 3-point percentage. Kayla McBride is the go-to 3-point shooter. But yeah, Kayla McBride and Bridget Carlton, the 2 of them, like I think they will play well, and they're gonna have to play well to make game 3 interesting. But again, I think we're gonna see Minnesota trying to get into actions early and shooting the ball a little more aggressively, looking for just letting it go, man. Sometimes, you may not be able to create like wide open, beautiful, perfect looks all the time. Sometimes even with someone in front of you, you just, you got 3 or 4 passes going. Like I've been watching a lot of media and stuff from practice and stuff players are talking about from the series, like and the coaches as well. And I heard someone, I think Stewie was talking about it, how like, these teams are so good that like you go through 2, 3, 4 actions, you move the ball, you hit a short roll, you get opposite, you move it 3, 4 times, and they're still there. Like you haven't created an open look yet because they're rotating, they're moving, there's someone still there. So it goes back to what I said. That's where in basketball, which is one of the things I love about the sport, it's where you've got to be able to go off script, ad lib a little bit, create something out of nothing. And that's where I think Minnesota has struggled a little bit more than New York, even though New York has their lapses and has their dry spells offensively. I will say there are times when it gets a little ugly,
scary,
and slow and dry and stale out there. I mean, my goodness, sometimes I'm thinking I'm just looking around like who's making a play from the perimeter? Like who is it going to be? I mean, but they tend to figure it out. But I really look at Minnesota as like they've got to get that offense humming early, get Kayla McBride off the pin downs, off the staggers, create some motion, like, go off the dribble without thinking, like, and Bridget Carlton, she's going to have to make some plays off the bounce. She can't just be catch and shoot. She's going to have to get some paint touches and make some things happen off the dribble for them as well. Cause they've got to, they're starting to lack some of that dynamism that I've talked about and that I've questioned in them. Like, are they dynamic? Are they going to be dynamic enough? I think that's a big question going into game 3. Can they uptick the dynamic offense?
Last thing I'll say about Kayla McBride before we move on to your concerns about Minnesota. There have been 4 games this postseason where Kayla McBride has scored at least 15 points in a game. Both games against Phoenix, game 5 against Connecticut, game 1 against New York. All 4 of those games, the Minnesota Lynx won. So when I tell you that she needs to be good for 15, 18 points, the proof is in the pudding right there. When she gives you at least 15 and she's shooting well, which you know she can do, the Minnesota Lynx are more likely to win themselves some basketball games. All right, let's toss it to one more clip of the show from last week, and then Martin is going to get into his concerns for Minnesota heading in to game 3.
My gut right now is feeling like Minnesota has this edge right now. And like I said, I do want to see, I'm so fascinated to see game 1 to see what kind of edge New York is coming out with. But I think Minnesota has such a connectivity right now. I would say New York is a little more talented. And if New York comes out a certain way, like I said earlier, I wouldn't be surprised of either team winning. I think it could go either way. I'm with you. I think every game is going to be close to a classic, barring something just unexpected and tragic. I think every game is going to be high level, edge of your seat, down to the wire. Yeah. So I feel like obviously the first game was spot on with that prediction of how these games were going to go. But game 2 ended up being close too. New York did the same thing. First quarter, 30 something points, 31, 32 points, goes up double digits. And by halftime, you're looking at it like this is still a game. Like Minnesota's not going anywhere. And that's why I said what I said about like who's coming out with the edge in this series. And game 1, I feel like is a crazy outlier because I just feel like it could have gone either way at the end with all the stuff that went down at the end of that game. But obviously that gave Minnesota a huge momentum boost, and really the way they were able to win that game. I mean, the largest comeback in WNBA Finals history. They were down 18. They were down by 12 with 4 minutes left in the game, and their resilience and their toughness and their tenacity, that game 1, I mean, that was what made me fall in love with Minnesota. That was the kind of performance that made me pick them. That was the Minnesota that won me over in the Connecticut series. New York, really impressive response in game 2. And I mean, we really just talked about pretty much all the things that have me concerned about Minnesota now. The 3-point shooting, the offense, I do think they're going to play better in game 3. But over, like, just big picture, my biggest concern is that if New York is locked in and dialed in, especially on the defensive end, I think offensively, again, we've seen New York struggle a little bit with like really creating consistent and smooth offense. Naj Laney bailed them out a lot with her offense in game 2 with her 20 points. But listen, they got players that can hit shots, that can score, that can figure it out. They have multiple weapons. I just wonder if we're starting to see, and I think game 3 is going to be a huge indicator, because I think this will be the game where we see both teams really dialed in. I think Minnesota will probably play their best game. Minnesota's been really good in some spurts, but for the most part, like the Liberty have been leading for most of this series. They've been the better team for most of the series. Like the Liberty have just looked better for more. Like it wasn't really, other than like a stretch, I think in the third quarter of game 2, and then like the last 5 minutes in, overtime of game 1, the Liberty have looked like the better team. So I'm concerned for Minnesota, because it's starting to look like if New York has really dialed in defensively, Sabrina, Stewie, Phoebich, getting deflections, being mindful of not letting the easy passes in, if they're dialed in like they were in game 2, and they're able to just do what they do offensively, I think both teams at their best, it's looking like the Liberty might just be the better team. And that's why I said from the beginning, even though I'm picking the Lynx and they're kind of making me pick them because I believe in them, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Liberty win, because I've believed in that group going back to last year and this year, even seeing their response in game 2. Like, people were questioning, as they should have. I mean, game 1 could have been a devastating loss for a team, for any team. That could be a momentum killer. They could have lost the series after that game 1 loss. But look at how the Liberty keep responding. Look at how they responded from losing to the Aces last year, from getting smacked by the Aces in game 3 and having to come back and prove like, no, we're the better team right now. So I think the Liberty kind of gained back their edge. I think game 3 is going to tell us a lot, but I am concerned because it feels like the Liberty have had more time to them, like showing themselves and showing everybody like, hey, we are the better team when we lock in. And usually when you have more time experiencing that throughout games, you kind of come to, and then when you get this close to winning it all, then when you get real close, it's like everybody is committed. It's like, yo, we know this works. We know we can stop them. We have to put in a little more effort. We have to have high hands on the post entries. We have to do all those little championship things that we talked about have to get done now. Like everyone, there's no more lapses, no more. We can't take plays off. We can't, I mean, we're going to get tired and stuff, but now we see that it works. So that's where I'm concerned for Minnesota. I think they'll play a lot better at home. I think game 3 might end up being the best game. It's hard to say because game 1 was a crazy, dramatic game, but I think we're going to see both teams play really smooth, and game 3 will answer some questions. But I'm concerned for Minnesota now. Real concern for my pick, because the Liberty, they look, they're committed, man. They keep responding. They keep responding to every moment.
That is true. I will say, right before we made our picks last week, what did I say? I said I felt more confident coming out of that Sun series that they were going to win than I did making the pick initially a couple weeks ago when Lauren asked us. As it stands today, I'm so in the middle.
Yeah,
for all the things that for all the reasons you mentioned, because when you look at it from a basketball standpoint, you're absolutely right. We have seen more instances where the Liberty have looked better. They've looked cohesive. They've looked locked in. They've looked championship ready. We've seen more instances of that than we have for the Minnesota Lynx. And that is an issue because you cannot go down. Lightning's not going to strike twice. We're not going to see another 18-plus point comeback by the Minnesota Lynx in order for them to win a game against Liberty. The Liberty, the one thing I know I can give credit to Liberty for, and a lot of it has to do with Sandy Bardella, they do not make the same mistakes twice. We're not going to see that again. They learned from that mistake in game 2. They put the hammer down. They left no room for they didn't even leave the door cracked. They didn't leave a window cracked. Everything was locked and shut down in game 2.
Well, it was a one possession game.
It was, but what I mean when I say that is like, there were a lot of things down the stretch of game one that didn't happen in game two for the Liberty. There were a lot of senseless turnovers in game one down the stretch of that game. There were a lot of bad shot choices and just bad misses by the Liberty that further added fuel to the Lynx's fire as they were coming back. The Lynx were still clawing back in this game too, but we didn't see a lot of those senseless turnovers. We didn't see a lot of those bad shot makes or those bad shot decisions and those bad misses. Like the Liberty kept the main thing from buzzer to buzzer, and that's what led to them not having to have a heart attack down the stretch of game four the way they did in game one, which ultimately led to the loss. So while I am still picking the Lynx, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that I am a little bit concerned right there with you about some of the things I've seen so far through the first two games of this series. With that in mind, it is time now for me to just put it all out there. I'm going to be honest. We're going to talk game three, and I'm going to give you my keys for victory for both the Lynx and the Liberty. We're going to start with the Liberty because they were the victors last time out. I just said it. You got to keep the main thing the main thing. I said it earlier in the show. I'm going to say it again. So far through two games, what you've shown me is that Jonquel Jones is the best player in this series. And for that reason, there's no reason why this offense shouldn't be flowing through Jonquel Jones. Let's get her touches early. Let's get her comfortable early, whether it's on the paint or in the paint, from the perimeter and mid-range, whatever it takes to get Jonquel Jones going early. That's what needs to happen because as we talked about earlier, number one, there is no true matchup for Jonquel Jones in Minnesota unless they're going to put Nafisa Collier on you. And Cheryl Reeve and the coaching staff in Minnesota, they're smart. They're not going to sacrifice Jonquel Jones' offense for Breanna Stewart's offense. They're not going to do that. That's the first thing. The second thing is in game one, we saw Leonie Fibich be the X factor step up. In game two, it was Betnai Jelani. I texted Martin this. It seemed pretty corny, but it's simple. The best four players on this team have to be the best four players on this team. Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Jonquel Jones, and Betnai Jelani. They have to be at the top of the game. But let's be honest here. Whether it's Naj, whether it's Fibich, either of those two, if they give you 15 points in this game, the Liberty are likely going to win. And number three, Courtney Williams can't have a fourth quarter like she had in game one ever again. We're at home. They're going to be feeling it. And I do believe if Courtney Williams gets going early, that could spell trouble for the Liberty later on down the stretch of this game in game three. Courtney Williams has to be stopped, and she has to be stopped early. Do whatever it takes to keep Courtney Williams out of a rhythm. Those three things happen. I think the Liberty go into Minnesota and they steal game three on the road. For the Lynx need this win. I'm going to be honest. If the Liberty win game three, I do not think the Lynx win the championship. That's how I feel. Despite the fact that I picked them to win it all, if the Liberty go into Minnesota, they win game three, I don't think the Lynx are going to win this championship. So in order for the Lynx to keep their championship hopes alive, in my eyes, number one, I just said it, Kayla McBride, 15 points or more seemingly guarantees a win for the Minnesota Lynx so far this postseason. I'm going to need Kayla McBride to give me at least 20 in game three. She probably won't. 15, 18 is good, but Kayla McBride has to get going. She is that three-point threat. She's the three-point threat. She is the heart and soul of the three-point offense, and the earlier and the sooner Kayla McBride is comfortable, the better off it is for Fee, the better off it is for Courtney Williams. On that same wave, Alana Smith, excellent point production in game two. Not so much on the rebounds. She gave us 9 rebounds in game one, only 2 in game two. Alana Smith has to be more aggressive on the boards. I mentioned it earlier in the show as well. The New York Liberty have dominated offensive rebounds in this series. That's been a big difference. They've had a lot of second, third, fourth, fifth, sometimes 6 chances on these possessions to put the ball in the bottom of the hoop. Alana Smith, she's probably, I would say, their best rebounder. She has to be aggressive and she has to get these rebounds. She has to make sure that the Liberty are one and done on these offensive possessions as much as possible. And then number 3, and most importantly, Nafisa Collier. She's a simple basketball player. We've said it, and we love the simplicity of her game. But at some point, we need to go out there and we need to see the Nafisa Collier that through 2 games through 3 games in the first 3 games of this postseason almost went for 100 points. We need to see that Nafisa Collier, the aggressive Nafisa Collier, the Nafisa Collier that can get a shot from anywhere, whether it's in the flow of the offense or that she's going out there and she's calling her number. Something needs to change. Nafisa Collier, that motor that Martin loves so much, we need to see that motor on full strength in game 3 from start to finish. And if the Lynx can do that, they can win game 3 at home. I do not know how to call game 3. I'm going to be honest with you, bro. I don't know which way to go. I want to say that the Lynx are going to win it because they're at home, and I like to think that they're going to play much better early on in the game at home than they did in New York. But to your point, We've seen New York be the better team so far through the first 2 games, despite the couple of spurts we've seen from Minnesota. If you had to pick a winner tonight, well, I'm making you pick a winner tonight for game 3. Who do you have winning the very important game 3 to take the 2-1 lead tomorrow night?
Man, it's so tough. I'd pick the Lynx in 5. Anytime I'm split on it, I say it's going 7 or it's going 5 or whatever. So I do think they're going to split in Minnesota in either way, even if
Sure.
I hear your point. Like if New York wins 2 in a row, if they win game 3, Minnesota's back is against the wall for game 4. And I don't think that's in their favor, but I do think either way they're going to split. I just think these 2 teams are too good.
Sure.
But I do think Minnesota's coming out trying to get hot in the first quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Minnesota's going to play probably their best all around game in game 3, and I would give them game 3. One point to about Courtney Williams, like, you talk about slowing them down. They changed the matchup on her right away in game 2. I mean,
they did.
They switched it from Naj to Phoebich at the start of the game. I think they're trying to keep more length on her. That's a big thing, man. If Courtney has to be aggressive, and it's been really impressive to see Courtney Williams take on the lead guard, hybrid guard role. Like, she says that she's been a point guard all year and all, but like, she's a scoring point guard. And that's her. Not only is that her natural game, and she's done a great job developing as a point guard. She runs a great pick and roll game. She's been making brilliant passes in the finals, but they also need her scoring. And that's also what she is a scorer. And so it's been really impressive watching her have that balance and bring it all the way to the finals. Like, that's a huge piece of what, who their team is.
Yep.
But if they're slowing her down from scoring at any capacity, that takes away what they need. Like, Minnesota needs a little offense from everybody. Yeah. Like we talked about Courtney and Fee needing help. I mean, we say that because they're the 2 main ones scoring. They need other people to score. You brought it up with Kayla needing to get at least 15. I brought it up with Bridget only having 13 points through 2 games. Yeah. So, I heard Cheryl Reeve even say it. Like she said, they've been smacking us in the mouth in the beginning of both games. First quarter of both games, New York wins like handily. Like, they come out hot, 30-point quarters, both first quarters. Yeah. And then it drops off from there. But Minnesota's like clawing their way back. I think they're going to try to hit the switch a little bit and try to get hot early.
So before on countdown, before the game tipped off in game 2, Shanae Gumike said that the Liberty needed a must-win game. There was a must-win game for Liberty in game 2 because, and I texted you this, that we hadn't lost back-to-back games since May, and the last team they lost back-to-back games against was this Minnesota Lynx team. I think equally as much, this is a must-win game for the Minnesota Lynx. Even if the Lynx lose this game and win game 4 and they split and we're back in game 5 in Brooklyn for game 5, I don't know if that's enough for the Lynx to win. For the reason you mentioned, we haven't seen the Lynx at their best yet this season. We've seen, or this series, we've seen Courtney Williams give us her best. We've seen Nafisa kind of give her best. We saw Kayla give her, but we haven't seen everyone play their best at the same time in the same game. If that doesn't happen, split games in Minnesota or no split games in Minnesota, you're not going to be able to go back to Brooklyn in game 5 and win a winner-take-all game for the championship on the road. It's not going to happen. I don't think, unless we can see a game before you even get to that point where everyone's playing at their best. So for that reason, I think Minnesota have to win this game, and I think they will win this game. These have been 2 of the best home teams all season. The Liberty did what they needed to do in this series, which was win game 2, or else they'd be facing elimination tomorrow night, obviously. But more importantly than that, the Liberty stole some momentum away, because I texted you and I told you that game 1 to me felt very eerily similar to the J.R. Smith game a couple years ago in the finals, where he dribbled the clock out in regulation and then the Cavs ended up losing in overtime. It felt very similar to that, and I don't think if I'm not mistaken, the Cavs got swept that season, that year, right? That scenario at the end of game 1 felt very similar to that, where the Liberty had, specifically Breonna Stewart, had 2 chances at the end of regulation to win it and at the end of overtime to force a second overtime where she couldn't get it done. And I thought that would be the switch, and we would see a much more aggressive Minnesota in game 2. We'd see a dominant performance from Minnesota in game 2, enforce a sweep potentially situation tomorrow night. That didn't happen. The Liberty got the job done. Now all eyes are back on Minnesota. The Liberty have looked their best, and we've seen it. We need to see it tomorrow from Minnesota, or they can be done. Whether they force a game 5 or not, they're not going to win the championship, I think, if they lose tomorrow.
Yeah, and lastly, it really is about the physicality and the defensive intensity in this series. Yeah. Like New York held them to 66 points in game 2. Mm-hmm. That was, if you watched the game, it was just all effort, hustle, rotating, right? Like it's all about defensive intensity. That's what it comes down to. If we're watching the beginning of this game and we're seeing Minnesota more physical, more active, New York's possessions are running down to the end of the shot clock more. They're preventing transition looks, for Sabrina, transition threes. Like those are the things that determine this kind of series. New York did a way better job of mucking things up and taking things away from Minnesota in game 2. Stewie having, what she have 7 steals.
Yeah.
Like,
record.
That's a dominant individual defensive performance. Along with, like I said, Sabrina had some brilliant defensive plays. John Quell is always a presence for them in different ways defensively. So that's really what it's going to come down to, man. And I look forward to seeing what Minnesota, like we talked about adjustments maybe on John Quell. I don't think we saw New York's best yet. Like, I don't think we've seen a game yet where everyone is at their best on either side.
Sure.
Like I said, Stewie's been greater on defense than she's been on offense. She's been pretty good on offense. Yeah. Naj Laney obviously came out, but like that, she had game 2. Phoebich had game 1. Yeah. Phoebich had the big transition 3 at the end of game 2, which I don't know. Why was that such like, I don't know. She was going to shoot that shot. Like, I don't know if it's just from playing my whole life or whatever, but like that was the right shot. Like, I love how people kind of pointed to that as like the Phoebich is like a savage, like she's so reckless.
I think it's
like a good way, like a compliment. But I'm like, bro, that was she had a 3-on-1. I think John Quell was ahead of her. Someone else was trained. Like, she knew she had numbers. If she misses, or Stewie was right there too on the left, she could have gotten the offensive rebound. I think she had Stewie and John Quell or someone else. Sabrina, because Sabrina was ahead. Sabrina was running. She got the steal, I think, or deflection. It kind of rolled up to Phoebich, but Phoebich really had the dagger with that 3 at the end of game 2.
That was her only make of the game, I think, too. And it was a great time for it to come. It was the nail in the coffin.
Again, Naj had game 2. Phoebich had game 1. So again, that 4th player has shown up big time for the Liberty so far in each of the 2 games. Yep. And Minnesota hasn't seen a 4th player step up yet. Yeah. The defense, really the defense is so big, man. It's going to be so big. And the physicality, that's why the broadcasters can't help but bring it up. Like, at so many moments, like, you see there is a lot of physical play happening out there. Yeah. And it's a lot of high level play happening where you have to have head on a swivel. There are cutters, there's ball movement, there's rotations, have to know your personnel. Is this the shooter, or is the next pass the next shooter? Do I stunt? Do I go? Like, this is when high level basketball is on display. So I just think Minnesota has to be physical and has to come out humming offensively in game 3. I think that's what they're going to try to do.
Absolutely. Before we go, let's go ahead and hit the comments real quick. Brooklyn says, what's good?
Yo, what up? What up? What up? What up?
Guess what's good, my G? What's up, man? How you doing? And my dad. It's good, Dad. How you feeling?
Hey, senior.
Always a pleasure when the senior taps in with us.
All right.
To all of you that watch with us live, we appreciate it. Thank you guys for tapping in with us. To those of you guys that will tap in later on before the game tomorrow, we appreciate that as well. As always, like, comment, subscribe. We want to hear from you. Join the conversation. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at @ProtectOurQueens_, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter at @POQueens_ to keep up with all of our thoughts, short form content for the finals and all things related to women's basketball. So for my guy, Martin Sories of Basketball Society. This is Marcus of the Protect Our Queens podcast signing off. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, you guys enjoy yourselves some women's basketball.